Listen, we curse a lot. Be advised. Hey y'all, I'm Jenn. I'm from Oakland, and I'm a queer, black, feminist scholar.
This is Daren, hailing from the mean streets of Anaheim. I'm an introvert, a novelist, and a nerd.
We're early 30-somethings with 3 kids and over a decade of marriage.
This is a podcast about the realities of blackness and adult life. We do adult differently.
This is That Black Couple. Greetings. I've been gone for a minute. Now I'm back with the jump off.
So, are you saying this episode is the jump off?
No, I guess not. I just feel like I want to say that because Lil' Kim said it a lot in the 90s and 2000s. And I've never had an opportunity to say it. And this is my opportunity to say it. So I'm just going to keep saying it.
Okay.
So
take your moment.
I am going to take my moment, damn it. So grab your kombucha. We're cleansing today.
Yes.
We're cleansing. We're trying to have nice skin. We're trying to have edges. We're trying to have like a healthy colon and digestive system. So get the kombucha. Take a seat. This is That Black Couple. I'm Jenn.
And I'm Daren.
And we're on episode 8. We're talking about Harvey Weinstein, which I don't want to talk about, but talk about Harvey Weinstein and gaslighting as culture. So just to be clear, we're talking more about gaslighting and sexual harassment and abuse, but Harvey Weinstein is really kind of representative of that right now. So we'll talk about him a little bit, not that much. But before we get started, make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ThatBLKCouple, on Facebook at That Black Couple, and look us up on the internet at www.thatblackcouple.com.
You can stream episodes on Google Play, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You have to rate us high or we'll take it very, very, very personally.
Very. On today's episode, we're talking about Harvey Weinstein and gaslighting as culture. In the First Things First segment, we'll discuss why it's important to be accountable for the people in our lives, especially when it pertains to sexual abuse and sexual harassment. Then, in the conversation, we'll dive into gaslighting, we'll define some terms, and illustrate how pervasive it is in our culture. And finally, in the reflection, we'll talk about sexual harassment in intimate environments like schools and the workplace, and why it's so important for men to be vocal about these issues. We've written a few articles at watercoolerconvos.com covering today's topics, and we'll cover some sources from around the web today too. We'll make sure to drop all those links in the show notes for you. Let's go.
There you go. Okay. So, like you said, we're talking about Harvey.
On a first name basis?
We might as well. I mean,
no.
It's Harvey Weinstein, whoever you say his name.
I say Stein.
Stein. I mean, that.
But I'm black, though.
It doesn't matter to me.
Me either. Fuck him.
So, his name has been all through the news, up and down, every day. More and more accusers coming forward, basically saying that he's been sexually harassing and abusing people for over 30 years.
Right.
The word that's been used to describe him is that it's pretty much been an open secret in Hollywood, meaning that people basically knew this was happening and they just kind of let it happen. I've read some things where people said like they would warn people and warn actresses to say, oh, well, you know, that Harvey guy, he's known to do some terrible things, so be careful, or, you know, if don't go to a hotel room with him because you never know what he might try and, you know, force upon you, you know. It's
amazing that we can create terms like open secret for something like this.
Right.
But yes,
For 30 years, over 30 years.
Right.
And this has been in the news for weeks at this point. And one of the people that came out and talked about it, of course, was, you know, our president, Donald Trump. Who we know is an abuser in his own right. And so he's come out and basically said like, oh, he's not shocked that, you know, liberal Hollywood is facing this.
Girl, go away and sit down.
And I think he had his press secretary come out and basically say, oh, all the people that are accusing him, you know, they just made it all up.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So it's on the Washington Post that literally everybody who's ever accused Donald Trump of anything is a liar.
Yeah, those people, they're just liars.
Yes.
Yeah, so don't believe those people.
Yes. But he's not shocked when someone else is doing it, though.
And as tragic as this is, I mean, I don't want to make light of this situation at all. For someone to be in the industry this powerful, I mean, he's been winning Oscars upon Oscars.
But we have to give more background though first, right? Because isn't the larger story that people have been trying to break the news about Weinstein for a number of years, and every time they've taken it to several news outlets, it's basically been killed, and like. Every story. So Ronan Farrow finally got this out, but like there's been multiple reporters who have come forward like on Twitter to say, I sent this story to, whatever publication, and they basically said, no, like we're not going to run this story. And
to me, it's a story of power, right? Because like we said, it's an open secret. So people knew. There have been a lot of people that have tried to tell a story. There are a lot of people that have been abused, that have been subject to his abuse, and tried to come forward and kind of get this to end. And from what I've read, at every turn, news outlets basically said, well, we don't have enough.
Right.
We don't have enough to actually go forward with the story and put it out.
Right.
And I think it's because they know that the power behind this guy is massive.
Right.
And so, number one, if you're going to come out with a story, it has to be just completely locked tight.
Right.
Because if anything is wrong, if anything gets questioned and is out of place, then the whole thing falls apart, and you're going to get sued for an ungodly amount of money. Right. And, who knows what could happen, or even just the fact that it then undermines the credibility of whoever is coming forward, right? And so even thinking about the people that are victims that have been abused and also trying to protect them, in a way, his power is still kind of acting as a protecting force.
Right. At
the same time, when we're talking about this open secret, it's one of the things where people knew. So there were other people that were complicit in this. We were talking about this earlier, and I've tried a couple times to read through the various articles.
Yeah, I can't do it.
That have kind of detailed people's accounts. I've only been able to get through maybe 2 or 3 accounts.
Right.
And I've read some summaries to basically say there were, real general, like abusive, like known abuser behaviors. Like there was a lot of honeypot things. There were situations where he would invite people to a hotel and they would meet in the lobby. And then he'd say, oh, well, now.
Lure him up to his room.
Right. And then lure him up to the room. And say, oh, let's come up to the room and let's go eat.
Right.
Oh, I'm a celebrity and I'm a known guy, so I can't just be out in public. Right. So we have to meet in my room. And it's like, okay, well, let's go meet in your room. And it's like, okay, well, now we're in your room. And wait, now you're in the bed and you're asking me to give you a massage.
And now your clothes are off.
And now your clothes are coming off. And now.
Right.
And so on and so forth. Right. And in some cases, I also read where he would set up meetings where it would be him and a woman colleague and an actress. And then conveniently they'd have the meeting for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then the woman colleague would be dismissed. Mm-hmm. And then so on and so forth. Then the abusive behavior begins. Right.
And then I read Lupita Nyong'o's account, and it seemed like these like really subtle ways that he just kind of like manipulates situations because he has that power, and the way she was telling it, which is basically like, I was a young actress. I was just coming out of college, my first movies, my first roles. And here's this huge mega producer, mega director. And I'm not going to basically argue with this guy. I don't want to give him any pushback. He invites me to his house. Of course I'm going to go. I don't want to turn him down. He invites me to a show. Of course I'm going to go. It just came off like there were a lot of ways that he absolutely knew that the intersections of his like whiteness, maleness, and power and proximity to having like moneyed wealth gave him so much ability to manipulate not even just like the women themselves, like in the situations, but also to manipulate the consequences of the actions. Because even after he would, harm these women, he did so much damage control where he'd still say like, call my secretary on Monday and we'll get you hooked up with something or whatever. And a lot of that stuff didn't pan out at all. Like it wouldn't actually even turn into a real opportunity, but it was still this process, like a whole system like in place to basically cover up this guy's abuse and harassment of women over years.
And that was one of the things I read that was I think the most disgusting thing to me about it I think one of the women said that, you know, he basically forced himself upon her. And then in the end, it was like right back to business. Like you said, like, oh, call my assistant, you know, we'll get you set up. You can test for this role.
Right.
Like very much like almost acting like what happened didn't just happen.
Right.
And I believe that the account I read, like this abuse happened to her a couple times with him, where he would do that and then it'd be right back to normal. Like this is just a normal operating way of business, to where it basically is telling you that he was so used to behaving in this way and feeling so safe and feeling so warranted in this, that he clearly didn't see anything wrong with it. He thought this is how we conduct business. This is normal.
And probably felt legitimate. And then after these accusations come out, you see like people like Ben Affleck and like Matt Damon or whatever, which is actually like, it's so irritating, because then you also see people who are on Twitter like, well, Ben Affleck, you're also sexually abusive. You grabbed my ass at a Halloween party, or you grabbed my ass at a Christmas party or whatever. And like, you're looking at this, and that's why I really want to talk about this episode and say, like, we're talking about Harvey Weinstein, but we're not really talking about Harvey Weinstein, right? We're talking about the entire ecosystem that allows for someone like Harvey Weinstein to exist and prosper and thrive for several decades as a sexual abuser. It's the same ecosystem that operated to make a Roman Polanski still have fans who are in Hollywood who are asking for him to be able to come back. It's the same ecosystem that allows for Woody Allen to be still making movies and people still playing in his films, even though we know that he's married to someone who he parented. You know, like, it's the same ecosystem that births a Bill Cosby and a R. Kelly. You know, so like, it's not a Harvey Weinstein conversation. It's a conversation about the culture and the ecosystem. And I feel like people have been talking a lot about rape culture, and we hear the term culture a lot, but we don't have a real analytical understanding of what culture is. Right.
And I think what you're getting at is what I think is most important here, right? Is, you know, Harvey Weinstein was the big name that came out first. That was like bombshell. Oh my gosh, this has been happening for over 30 years. Big open secret. Oh my gosh, Hollywood is so bad. How did they let this guy get away with it for so long? And what I've noticed hasn't gotten as much coverage is, in the wake of these allegations coming forward, I think what's happened is a lot of people it's kind of emboldened them and gave them some courage to actually come forward and come with other allegations to other people that have been doing the basically same exact thing,
if not worse. Yeah.
And I mean, just a couple names. There's a big one. There's a Hollywood agent. His name is Tyler Grasham. He's a really, really big agent in Hollywood. 2 men have come forward with allegations basically saying that he was sexually harassing and abusing them. You have a big director, James Toback. I think last time I checked, the number of allegations that have come, a number of people and allegations that have come forward against him is upwards of 300 right now.
Wow.
NBC's Mark Halperin, a really big one. I mean, this guy's been working in news for a lot of years. He worked at ABC. He worked at NBC. He was working on, with HBO, I think, on a movie based upon the most recent election. Huge sexual harassment allegations. He's been put on leave at NBC. I mean, it's like, I don't want to make light of the fact that there's a lot of people here that we're clearly seeing that have been subjected to the worst type of abuse, been put in these really compromising positions, and based upon people's power within the industry, basically been subjected to all types of horrific treatment and abuse, and who knows, you know, what type of effect it has on them in the long term. But I think that is one of the, I guess a good thing that has come out of this is people are starting to kind of open up their eyes and become aware of the fact that this isn't just one guy.
Right.
It's not this one guy that was like, oh, he was the one oddball, the one bad egg in the bunch that was getting away with it for so long, and now we caught him, so now we got it all fixed.
Right.
Like we're saying, and like you were saying, this is a culture. This is something that's ingrained. Right. This is not a one-off thing. This is not a one guy. This is not a 5-guy thing. This is a lot of guys. This is a lot of people. This is ingrained in the culture of Hollywood, of of exerting power over other people in the worst ways.
Right. And I think that when we see cultural phenomenon like, boys will be boys, or, grab them by the pussy recording.
Right.
Or the fact, if you think about the whole grab them by the pussy thing, the fact that happened and nobody was up in arms when that was recorded. They were up in arms when it was released, and not that much. He still won the election. Right. But or like thinking about Momoa sitting on the stage and making jokes about, we all love Momoa. He's fine, I guess, but his credentials are kind of docked now because he sits on the stage, in a recent clip I saw on Twitter, and is saying that he loved being on Game of Thrones because he got to rape beautiful women, like that. And everyone in the audience is like laughing. There's uproarious laughter when Jason Momoa says, I got to rape beautiful women. And that's why I like being on the show.
Yeah, what does that say?
What does that say? And it's one of those things where like you have to start asking questions about like what are the subtle ways that every single day that we are exposed to and conditioned by, this idea of a culture of rape, a culture of sexual assault, a culture of sexual harassment, a culture that tells us that some people's bodies do not belong to them. They belong to, men or patriarchy or power, and that those people in power can do with those bodies as they wish. And that's really what this Weinstein and this Woody Allen, situation tells us. It tells us that there are certain people who, because of their proximity to power or their ownership of certain wealth, that can basically do as they wish. And that's what we have to start thinking about, and how we can challenge that, and how we can like call that out for what it is and have clear definitions and clear language for what that phenomenon is, so that we can start to figure out ways to combat it and reduce the harm that's done to, usually for the most part, overrepresented is women, but obviously these types of abuses happen to all types of people, right? Yeah. So this is not a binary gender situation. It's not like it only happens to like cis hetero women or something like that.
Not at all.
Yeah, not at all. It's obviously a phenomenon that happens to women, femmes, trans folks, non-gender conforming folks. It happens to folks all on the binary, and also cis hetero men as well.
Yeah, who is the actor? Terry Crews came out,
right,
and said the same thing. He was like, I was in a room in Hollywood with right. a white guy, and he just grabbed my genitals,
right.
And was put in that position and basically said, if I took any action against him,
it'd have been that angry black guy was beating up on this little white guy.
Right.
Absolutely. And that is also a form of power. And people keep thinking like that power only comes in like physical size or physical, like, physique or whatever. Terry Crews is seen as this kind of like chiseled physical embodiment of manliness or whatever. But even he was silenced, and even he was like kind of relegated to the shadows when it comes to this kind of sexual assault that happened to him, because of his proximity to his distance from whiteness and his distance from that power. And it's like, we have to stop thinking about, sexual assault and sexual harassment as being a woman's issue. We have to stop doing that, first of all. B, we have to stop thinking about it as somehow having something to do with physical bodies and like attraction and looks and things like that. Like, I'm really tired of this idea that it's like Mia Bialik had this article, I know, her article that was basically like, I'm not that cute and I have a big nose. Or no, she called it, I'm sorry, a prominent nose. And I dress modestly. And somehow, like, I couldn't tell what she was trying to say exactly, but it just read like, well, if you just wear frumpy clothes and aren't traditionally beautiful, in air quotes, then maybe you won't be sexually assaulted by people like Harvey Weinstein. Like, we have to stop that shit. Like, we have to debunk that shit. That's fucking bullshit. Like, it has nothing to do with physical embodiment. That's not what sexual assault is about. Anybody can be sexually assaulted. Anybody can be raped. And all bodies are sexually assaulted and all bodies are raped. It happens all the fucking time. And so I really want to like push past the narrative, because I feel like this Harvey Weinstein thing has also like highlighted the ways that we still can't like really grapple with the fact that these issues are about power. When Lupita Nyong'o came out with her account, there were a lot of people who really were like not really checking for it because she's a darker skinned black woman. And I think that kind of challenged their idea of like Weinstein's ideas of what he was trying to like, who he wanted to sexually assault. And then even he came out and had some feedback like, oh, that wasn't that was consensual. Right. I'm like, wait, so all these women are coming out and saying that you did all this stuff, and the one person who you're like, well, wait, is Lupita Nyong'o? Like, we got to talk about that.
And to be honest, like I said, I've read some of these accounts. Her account was tame compared to a lot of these other accounts.
It was super tame. It was super
like she was put in some really compromising positions and basically declined and had to like run. Like a lot of these other women had like forced bodily contact.
Right.
It was forced viewing of him pleasuring himself. I mean, just nasty, despicable acts that people were forced into.
Right.
And he's not saying anything about those.
Of course not. Of course not. Of course not. And so I think we need to really grapple with like this, what the culture is, because the culture is trying to say several things. The culture is trying to tell us that only certain types of bodies can be raped or sexual assaulted or sexually harassed, which is, we all know is not true. The culture is trying to tell us that rape, sexual harassment, and sexual assault is about desirability, which we also know is not true. And the culture also wants us to believe that somehow, like, when it comes to like white, cis, heterosexual men with money, that somehow we still need to just give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, we need to just give them more chances. Just listen to Ben Affleck. Just listen to Matt Damon. Just listen to Mia Bialik. There's all these ways. I mean, Sunny Anderson even went on Twitter like, she went on Twitter like, just say no, girl. Listen.
I was raised in a way where
we have to stop this cultural phenomenon where people think that sexual assault and harassment and rape is really about like how the victim or survivor navigates the system of sexual harassment, assault, and rape. That's really not how this whole process works. It's just not how this process works. And when we start to really be honest with ourselves about what this culture is and what this culture is not, then we might actually have a smidgen of a chance of doing something about it.
Thank you for listening. We are the proud founders of watercoolerconvos.com, a platform at the intersections of blackness, culture, and adulting. We started that black couple to dive deeper into the issues facing young black millennial folks navigating the anti-black, anti-queer, white supremacist world today. This podcast is supported by donations and patronage of our listeners and readers of our blog. You should head over there and check out some of the content when you get a chance.
If you would like to become a monthly subscriber or patron and help fund our content, sign up at www.patreon.com/watercoolerconvos. Patreon is spelled Patreon.com. Please consider giving $5 or $10 per month to help us build our platform and grow our organization. We really want to hire new writers and social media people, y'all, but we can't do that without your help. You can also give a one-time donation at www.paypal.me/watercoolerconvos. All donations are welcome. You can stream the show on Google Play, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. When you listen, please consider hitting that heart button, sharing an episode, giving us a 5-star rating, and leaving some dope-ass comments. This helps us with our page views and also gives us more listeners for the show. Thank you so much.
Let's get back to the show.
Okay, so we're back, and it's time for the conversation.
Yep.
So what I really want to talk about is I want to talk about this idea of culture. I feel like a lot of people say rape culture, slut shaming, body shaming, all these terms, and like they've gotten really common and really popular, but we don't get a lot of description of what they actually are.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of people use the words, and I'm not sure they actually understand what they mean.
I don't think so. So, I mean, first of all, when I think about culture, at a basic sense, this is like some Pierre Bourdieu type stuff, right? So Pierre Bourdieu is a theorist, sociologist, philosopher who's talked a lot about how we come to learn about who we are, basically. And he has this thing called the Habitus. And the Habitus is basically like how we learn social norms and social being. And I would think that the kind of Bourdieu's way of saying what culture is that it's a set of logics and a set of practices and norms that tell us how to interact with one another and how to behave in society. So there's like acceptable ways that we learn how to behave. Like it's social conditioning.
Okay.
So a lot of thinkers have talked about culture and the habitus. And the habitus is interesting because it's like, it just means like habits. Like, what are our habits? Like, we wake up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we watch certain television shows. You know, American culture tells us that we're supposed to eat certain things on certain holidays or whatever, right? So those are our kind of cultural norms and logics. So if we think about the term rape culture, then I think that helps. Like, if we think about culture in those terms, it helps us understand what rape culture means. So we should start thinking about the ways that rape shows up, rape, sexual assault, sexual harassment turns up in our everyday lives. Like, what are the logics, the habits, the norms, the practices where we basically are socialized to live with and around and in proximity to language or behaviors that promote and substantiate rape, sexual assault, and harassment of people, usually people who are seen as femme or who are read as women, right? That's kind of the culture, right?
Okay.
And so for me, it's like when I hear rape culture, I'm thinking like the fact that if you watch most movies, like this is why I don't watch a lot of mainstream movies. They joke about rape a lot. Like they joke about rape a lot. So like, I won't call any out by name, but like you watch a lot of movies where there's like a predominantly like a white male lead or like the white blonde love interest who probably has like a small waist and large bust line. And at least 2 or 3 times in the movie, you'll hear something like some type of joke about like a date rape drug or something along the lines of like something sexual assault adjacent, something where the person's either like touching their body jokingly, or there's always that scene where they land on top of each other and his hands are both grabbing both breasts, or, like that is sexual assault, right?
Yeah.
If I am standing somewhere and your hands are both grabbing both of my breasts, you are sexually assaulting me. That's what that is. You are grabbing my body without my permission. And it's not a cute, funny joke. But if you think about that and you start thinking about the times you've seen that joke, in air quotes, in a movie, it happens all the fucking time. All the time. There's almost always some joke where like there's a camel toe or something and we have to laugh at that. Or somebody ends up in a sexual position where the guy's on top of her and that's supposed to be sexy and romantic or whatever. That's not romantic. It's not romantic. In real life, like folks do not want you in their crotch and in their genitals. In real life, folks do not actually want you grabbing parts of their body without permission. It's not actually funny. Like the, oh my gosh, I accidentally hit you on the ass joke. That's not a joke. It's not funny, right? And I feel like when we think about movies and TV shows, that shows up. When we think about music, some of our biggest songs, like this is one of the things that we hated about like, what was that, circa 2013? That's when, Robin Thicke was big on the radio.
Yeah.
Blurred Lines, a whole song that's basically about date rape.
Yep.
And little kids were singing about these blurred lines. An entire song that's basically like, you're too drunk or high to consent. But isn't it interesting how that is so funny and cool? Let's just do some sexual shit anyway. No. It's not cute. It's not cute. But to me, that's one of those cultural logics. That's what is meant by rape culture. Rape culture is this like norm and this logic that we can make a funny he cutesy song that ends up being played everywhere. We have him performing on the MTV Music Awards and stuff. He's like on the Billboard Top 100 singing about the blurred lines between consent and non-consent.
Yeah, saying, I know you want it.
Right. I know, even though you can't consent because you're not sober. Right? That's against the law. That's rape. right? That is what people mean when they say rape culture. And I feel like a lot of times we don't really have a thorough conversation about what rape culture is, because first of all, people don't want to talk about it, and they don't like terms. Like people don't like terms because I feel like they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be in trouble because it's probably talking about me. This is probably something that I actively do, right? Because another part of rape culture is gaslighting. Mm-hmm. Right? And people don't like talking about gaslighting, but gaslighting is one of those things where basically the, loose definition is basically where you try and convince someone that their reality is not real, right? People do this all the time to survivors and victims of sexual assault, right? What were you wearing? Were you drinking? Why'd you go out at that time of night, right? That's all gaslighting. This idea that if you exist in public after a certain time of day, then rape just happens. Sexual assault just happens. Sexual harassment just happens.
Yeah, the whole idea of you were asking for it.
You were asking for it. You were
advertising in a certain way.
Right. Because your body is an advertisement if you're outside and femme or women. Right. Exactly. The other thing I want to get at too is that there are a lot of ways that gaslighting happens and rape culture happens, but it's very subtle. And I think that we pay a lot of attention to the larger, more fantastical, spectacular embodiments, but not so much to the daily, right? That's what I really want to focus on, is like the daily logics, right? What I've gotten a lot when I call out like sexism or sexual harassment or sexual abuse, things like, are you sure you saw what you think you saw? Or maybe you're just being too sensitive, or maybe you're taking it personally, right? Because somehow like me taking something personally makes the thing not a thing, right? Because I should be more objective about someone touching my body, or I should be more objective about somebody repeatedly asking me for my phone number in a professional workplace and I not want to give it to them, right? Like the idea that sexual harassment or sexual assault can somehow be conditioned by how personally you take it, right? And that's gaslighting.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's because you're a survivor. This is a very common one. Oh my gosh. Yeah. This is a very common one. Maybe it's because you're a victim or survivor of sexual assault. So you're seeing something that's just not there. You just want to see it because that's how that works. Right?
I feel like that one's like a leveled up version of gaslighting.
Right. It's so problematic, but it's so on the one hand, it's like, it's one of those things where the clock is right twice a day, right? Because on the one hand, it's like, well, I am a victim and survivor, so I can see it probably better than you if you're not, right? Mm-hmm. So I actually have the tools probably to see it a little bit better than you because I've experienced it. So I have expertise in an area that you don't. And whether I like having those expertise or not, or whether I'm excited about that or not, has nothing to do with the situation. But as somebody who has experienced it, yes, absolutely, I can recognize it. However, the idea that somebody who's a victim or survivor of sexual assault or harassment or abuse or rape wants to continue to see that, right?
Yeah.
And that's a very common idea. The idea that like people who deal with these types of exploitations and oppression or other forms of abuse and assault, whatever, like dealing with that. Like they just like being a victim. And you hear this all the time. Oh, you're just pulling the victim card or whatever. And it's like, no, that's not a fun card to pull. Like I love the like unicorn card. I love the black girl magic card. I love the like, I got an extra appetizer at the restaurant card. Most people are not pulling a victim card, right? It's like, that's really not a common thing. That's actually made up by people who want to continue to harm victims and survivors of sexual assault, right? Or maybe you just have a personal problem with them. Or this is one of my favorites in a bad way, but you're the only person who feels that way. So it's probably not real.
That's like a gaslight superpower.
Superpower. But you're the only person. No one in the whole world, because especially if everyone else is silenced, how can you disprove that? Right? You can't actually disprove that. If everyone else is systematically being silenced by this person, how can you ever disprove that you're the only person? You can't. There's no way to prove otherwise. Or You really don't know them that well. You're making really big assertions, or maybe you should just give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. And I feel like these are the ways that like we learn very early on that some people get more chances, you know, even when what they do is particularly heinous. And that happened right after this whole Weinstein thing happened too. It was like, oh, well, you know, but he's Harvey Weinstein. He's just done all this great work, you know. Oh, but he's done such great stuff. R. Kelly, but he makes such great music. Oh, but he's such an artist. He's so talented. Roman Polanski, he's an artist, but we need him. We need his work. As if there are not 700 million other talented folks out here who can make movies and make music and make art without abusing people.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, we're gonna not have any more movies or any more music.
Yeah.
Or even if that was the cost, if the cost was we won't have any more movies or any more music, that, oh, well, it's okay.
Right.
It's okay for them to continue doing that because I want some movies.
Listen, fuck the movies and that music. If we're out here abusing people, like we're out here abusing people and harming people, and you're like, well, I really need this new CD. I'm sorry, wait, we don't have CDs because I'm a millennial. I really need this new album. Right? Like that to me, this is what it gets down to, like these daily logics, these daily practices. These are practices.
Yeah.
Like when we tell ourselves that our listening pleasure is more important than women's lives. When we tell ourselves that being able to go sit in a movie theater and watch something is more important than people being abused and assaulted. Like that to me is a cultural logic, and that is a way that these abusers are enabled and are basically told that the system will always be gamed in their favor.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is we're talking about this as culture. And I think that's what's really important and to center here is when you think about culture, we're all living, you know, quote unquote, under the same culture. And I think people tend to want to go along with whatever culture says. So if culture says it's okay to do this, then, oh, well, let's do that. Or
right.
So if culture says, yeah, let's, you know, R. Kelly, he makes great music and we're all going to listen to it, then okay, let's listen to it and let's disregard
right.
you know, all the abusive behavior that we know is going on.
Right.
And that's why I know you wrote a piece about R. Kelly where you said, just to remind everyone,
right?
You can't listen to R. Kelly music and love black women at the same time.
It's impossible.
Like you can't divorce the artist from what he's actually doing in his life. It's not like those are two separate people.
Right.
It's not like we can put, you know, the offender in jail and have the artist still be free in the record studio.
Right.
Like,
right.
That's not how this works.
No, it's not.
But I think that's what happens with culture is it's like, oh, well, you know, R. Kelly is built into the culture, or, you know, Harvey Weinstein, you know, he's making all these, you know, Oscar worthy films. I mean, he's a star maker. He's a hit maker. I mean, he's part of our cultural landscape. You know, we'll let him slide, or, you know, we'll let him go through, or we know that he has this abusive behavior, but, you know, the ends justify the means because everyone makes a lot of money in the end, and the movies are great and wonderful, and everyone's going to go see them, and lives has been changed. Or it's when these people kind of get built into the cultural framework,
right,
that we start to kind of give them passes, and we start to say, oh, well, it's okay. Oh, or like you said, certain people get extra passes. They can do more wrong,
right,
and we still say, well, but they did do that one thing, so it's okay this time. Or we can let this other thing slide because, you know, that movie was my favorite and it's going to always hold a special place in my heart.
Right. And but then what does it also say about how little we value women in films, right? Like it to me, that's what comes out of this. That's the larger story that comes out of this, which is we really are willing to let women in films just die out here for the shit that we like and want. You know, it's literally like, okay, we really like our movies, or we really like our culture, or our TV shows, or our listening pleasure, or our viewing pleasure, or our cars, or our whatever our consumer goods are. And if it's women in films out here dying, if it's black people out here dying, if it's poor people out here dying, if it's disabled people out here dying, you know, if it's people out here getting assaulted, and, you know, and let's be clear here. When I say dying, I'm talking about slow death. Right? I'm talking about the ways that And I maintain this. I maintain that there are certain ways that specifically people of color, specifically Black people in the United States, we die at particular rates and we die in particular ways that are state-based and state-sanctioned. And sexual assault, sexual violence, sexual harassment, these types of like ongoing abuses that are experienced daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, annually contribute to all types of hypertension, all types of other diseases, all types of other stresses and indicators that cause all types of other bodily stressors that to me contribute to a slow death, right? And so when I say dying, I'm talking about the entire process of being born into the U.S. and the whole necropolitics of being Black. That's the politics of being born as a Black person in a system that is systematically set up to annihilate you for being Black, right? So when I say dying, I'm talking about the process of like being in a system that is gamed for your annihilation.
And that is, I think, is really one of the most interesting points, right? Is this system and this culture is not set up for us to win.
No, it's not.
It's not set up for our benefit. Yet far too often we just go along with it anyway.
Right.
What we really should be doing is we should be pushing back against the culture. We should be thinking critically about the things that we consume and the people that we exalt and say are great and what we see as cultural touchstones and is important, and say, is that really what I should be exemplifying and being, is that really what I should be following? Is this culture really something that serves me? Is it something that serves the people that I love? Does it serve my people? Does it serve the people that are marginalized in this world, or does it not? And far too often it does not, and we're not pushing against it. And if we were pushing against it, some of these situations I think would not be occurring. We would be, I often think about really myself as a father, as a man, as a father, raising children. I know for us, a lot of times we'd really try to expose our kids to what some people will call adult subjects.
Right.
One of them really being consent, and having them really understand from an early age what consent is and how people's bodies are their bodies.
Right.
And you don't have the ability or the freedom to just infiltrate on someone's body for whatever reason.
Right. You
need to seek consent whenever you're kind of going into someone's own personal space and personal bubble.
Right.
And I feel like if we as a people did more of that, of raising people and teaching them these concepts from an early age, we could be pushing it against these insidious cultures that exist in our world right now.
I agree. And I think it's about raising whole people and like teaching about things like consent. But I think it's also about being realistic with like ourselves, like being honest with ourselves and saying like, this culture ain't for us. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of folks like want to hold on to this shit like it's made for us, and it's just simply not.
They want to latch onto a piece that does serve them.
Right. It's like you trying to assimilate, or you trying to embody, or you trying to like emulate or whatever. And it's like, legit, it's really not made for us, and you're never really gonna fit. You're never gonna find your place in there. So, I mean, you trying, and that's cute, I guess, but no. I mean, I think that's my concern. It's like, why are we so attached to a culture that's legit trying to kill us?
Yep.
You know? And why are we attached to a culture that's trying to tell us that the reality that we see before our very eyes is not real? That with the stuff that we're experiencing is not actually happening before our very eyes. Like, we can see it, touch it, taste it, it's tangible, we hear it, we live it and breathe it every single day. And we live in a culture that's like, nope, that's not real. Nope, nope, you didn't see that. Nope, Harvey Weinstein, great guy, never heard of it. Nope, hasn't assaulted anyone. Nope, give him a chance. Nope. What, girl? No. I
mean, that's what's behind the whole concept of being woke.
Right.
It's like, wake up.
Open your eyes, girl. Neo, you want to be Neo. You don't want to be up in that egg no more.
You better choose the
right
field.
This is the Matrix. Get out the Matrix, right? And so I think to some degree, like, you know, we really have to grapple, especially as like, you know, young Black folk, we have to grapple with like how much of this culture we are really willing to invest ourselves in, right? And then like on the other side of that is like, yes, absolutely, we have to like raise people who can be honest and clear about like these terms. But in the meantime, you know, when we're not raising other people, we have to also like challenge ourselves and those folks around us to be honest and clear about what we're willing to take and what we're not willing to take. And for me, I'm not willing to let somebody gaslight me. Like, I've had people try and gaslight me, and I'm like, you're really not gonna dislodge me from my truth. Like, maybe in my early 20s when I was younger, I had a really hard time, and I would be like, yo, maybe I'm not right. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm not seeing this correctly. But I got to a point where I was like, fuck that. My eyes work just fine. I mean, they don't work that well, but when I have my glasses on or my contacts in, they work really well, you know, and I know what's happening to my body. I know what has happened in my life. I know me better than anybody else knows me. I know my experiences better than anybody else knows my experiences. Why would I cede my experiences and my life and my embodiments to someone else to tell me how to interpret them? Right? Like, why would I let somebody else be the interpreter of my journey?
Well, I think what's hard about it is especially when you have huge numbers, right?
Right.
I think that's where gaslighting becomes so dangerous, right? When you have one person who's like, are you sure? And then they amass a group of people around them that back them up and say, yeah, I agree with them. I think it's you.
Right.
I think you have a personal problem.
Right.
I think you just have something that you need to deal with within yourself, and you're just taking it out on this person who's innocent.
Right.
And then when those numbers start to mount and they're all contradicting something that you know to be true within yourself from your own experiences, it makes you question, wait, is my own experience right?
Right.
Am I perceiving it wrong? Did I not experience it the way that I thought I experienced it?
Right.
It's like you have to start questioning your own sanity when you have all these people questioning you.
Right.
And I think that's where gaslighting becomes so dangerous, because
it's very dangerous,
because you're questioning, like you said, you're questioning things that you are certain and know to be true.
Right.
And it kind of rocks someone to their core.
It does. And it's very dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous. And this is why a lot of folks who survive, sexual assault have a lot of long-term issues with, other forms of mental illness. That's why it causes all types of PTSD and anxiety and depression and a host of other issues, because a lot of that is a matter of putting yourself back together from an experience that, rocks you to your core, but then also having to deal with the consequences and the ripple effects of something that you didn't even cause, right? Something that wasn't even you didn't even do it. And then people expect you to somehow be responsible for what happened. Mm-hmm. And that's been my experience, where it's you experience sexual assault or sexual violence and harassment or whatever it may be. And after that happens, it's like, okay, now I got to figure out how to navigate this shit, right? Now I have to figure out how to navigate this, and dealing with the way that people try to project shit onto you. They try to project this lasciviousness, or oh, you weren't wearing the right things or whatever. And, you were too sexually available. That somehow has something to do with it. Or, they try to project onto you oh, well, maybe you just are regretting something that you actually wanted or whatever, and there's all these ways that you have to kind of be very resolute in who you are. It takes a lot of work to kind of build up that resoluteness, and it's not easy. It's really not easy. So I don't want to make it seem for these women who are coming out in terms of Harvey Weinstein, or any of the other folks who are coming out in response to anyone else that we've mentioned, somehow that they are, to blame, or somehow that they didn't come out fast enough, or that because they were being gaslighted that they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't have they weren't responsible or something like that. What I'm suggesting is that for everyone else, right? For everyone else who's witnessing this, right? For all the people who are a part of that whole open secret society, right? For all those people who kind of normalize this stuff, for all those people who read the articles on New York Times and the New Yorker and Washington Post and NBC and CBS and all this stuff, and who are seeing all this information and watching it on the news, and who are thinking things like I just said, oh, well, maybe they need to just stop wearing those clothes. Or maybe they need to stop going to the person. Why were they in his room? Or maybe they should just, not be out in Hollywood dressing like that. Or maybe they should just try and get a different job. Or maybe those are the people I'm concerned about, right? I'm concerned about the cultures and the logics and the practices that we kind of all participate in, right? there's a certain complicity that we all kind of have a certain level of responsibility for. And that's where I'm like, yo, at some point we have to be honest about how I think we've all probably done this, right? Even the most wokest of all the wokest have done this, where we've asked those questions, because we're all acculturated in the same society. We're all socialized in the same environments. We're all socialized into white heteropatriarchy. We're all socialized into anti-blackness. We're all socialized into the same shit. And so, I'm sure we've all asked these questions, and we should be challenging that. Like, we should be challenging that and not asking questions as to why a victim or survivor did A, B, C, or D, or anything through Z, right? We should be asking why we sit down on the sidelines and we're still willing to consume products from people who we know are harming people, right? Whether that be sexually harming people, monetarily, or other forms of harm. Why we're sitting here watching folks who are like venture capitalists and like, neoliberalists who are using their economic wealth to screw over the poor.
Yep.
There are a lot of questions that we should be asking. And I feel like when we start talking about culture and gaslighting and the stories about Weinstein, which I can't even actually read them all because they're just so disgusting, we should be asking ourselves how much of this stuff we're invested in and how much we've just been sitting by watching and thought was basically okay, because that's just what we do here. That's just part of the culture.
Like what you hear? You can find my mom and dad, aka That Black Couple, on the web at thatblackcouple.com. You can find them on Facebook at That Black Couple, and you can find them on Instagram and Twitter at That BLK Couple. If you have questions or comments about the show, email them at thatblkcouple@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.
All right, so now it's time for the reflection.
Let's do it.
I know now we're going to get a little personal.
Mm-hmm.
And so just thinking about rape culture and kind of how that has personally affected me and shown up in my life, I honestly would just think about growing up and how those things in culture kind of become part of your life, how those things are taught to you in as you noted, like really subtle ways.
Yeah.
I grew up, I had a circle of friends that was basically all boys, and we, did quote unquote boy things. We did a lot of sports. There was a lot of talk about girls that people liked. And there was a lot of pressure of, let's go touch so-and-so's butt, or let's, grab them, or let's tackle somebody, or, all types of stuff that at the time seemed just silly.
Yeah.
And as an adult, I've heard other people kind of just characterize as, oh, that's just, kid stuff. They're just joking, or they're just, being playful, or, that's boys being boys or whatever. But, in my more mature self now, really just realizing what that stuff is. And it's essentializing and making light of kind of throwing consent out of the window.
Right. And
just kind of actually objectifying people and their bodies and taking their own humanity out of it and, turning them into objects.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because, as we're talking about this subject about rape culture and people like Harvey Weinstein, we're talking about adults. And I always kind of think like, how did people get here?
Yeah.
To a certain point, we talked about power and how power kind of emboldens people and gives them the space and the ability to do things that they might not otherwise do.
Right.
But it kind of gives them almost like a feeling of safety and security and ability to kind of do things that might be outside of the quote unquote norm.
Right.
And, but I even think about, as I said, kind of even as a child, I felt like those same dynamics were there.
Yeah. I
felt like some people felt like they had power. Some people, it was just on a smaller scale, like, oh, well, I have a lot of friends, or I'm really, really popular, or I can say something bad about you and I can shame you and everyone will believe me.
Right.
And I just feel like those same power dynamics are present from childhood all the way into adulthood. And we see the same things as kids, as we see as teenagers, as we see as young adults, and as we get older and grow older. And it's the same things happening.
Right.
And as we've noted before, what we have to really do is push back against it. I mean, even as a kid, some of those things happen, or people said you should go do this, or you should go say this, or you should go, I think I was on like a camping trip or something, and someone was like, you should go with her in that tent, and you guys should, do, just, like I said, what people would call like silly kid stuff,
right.
People would call that.
Right.
And when knowing that's actually not what it is.
Right.
And I'm just thinking about how it's amazing to me how that stuff is present even as a child, and how I knew it was wrong then.
Right.
Like it felt wrong.
Yeah.
Even if, like, we've talked a lot about how we've grown up and we've learned and we've kind of put language to things. Even as a kid, when you don't necessarily have the language for certain things, you know that some things are wrong.
Right.
And I think we have to be able to have the courage to say, just because somebody else said so, or culturally I get the message that this is how things are supposed to go, that if I feel within myself that it's wrong, that I then don't do it.
Right.
And if I see my friend doing something that I know within my spirit is wrong, I should be able to go to my friend and say, hey, I don't think that's cool for reasons A, B, C, D, and E.
Right.
I feel like there should also be some accountability there for our friends and for our loved ones, to kind of help them and show them the way of this is right and this is wrong.
Right.
To also kind of, I think sometimes there's also, when we're talking about culture, there's that kind of a group thing of, well, culture says, so I'm going to do this. But if you hear one person say, well, I know culture is saying this, but I think that's wrong.
Right.
And if inside of themselves, they already felt like it was wrong, but they were just going along because they felt like that's what you're supposed to do, they're now getting a message of someone else saying, no, I think that's wrong too.
Right.
Which kind of helps them to feel like, okay, wait, so me thinking it was wrong wasn't something that was off. I'm not just having a thought that's not in line with other people. Other people are having the same thoughts as me. And I think that helps people to feel more secure in following their own path and following what their own moral compass says is right or wrong.
Right. I mean, I also think that it's important for people who are like in power or who have more power to do that work with other people who are in power or have more power.
Yes.
Like, I think that part of the issue is that a lot of people who are like disprivileged in certain ways end up being the people who have to stand up and say something. And that's why the gaslighting and the rape culture and the processes of sexual assault and sexual harassment and the systems that work to support abusers and harassers work so well, right? That's why they're so effective, because the people who speak out are the people who have been harmed, and the people who are not harmed are basically in partnership and friendship and loving relationships with people who are abusing and harming. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, I think that, to your point, for like young men in particular, since young men are overrepresented in terms of abusive relationships and causing abuse and harm, men are overrepresented. And usually it's cis heterosexual men who are overrepresented in that respect. And I think that in the case of what we've brought up today, we've focused on a lot of white cis heterosexual men who are also very, very wealthy. And I think that the fact that when this news came out, that it was white cis heterosexual wealthy men who were like, no, they're fine. That's the problem. Yes. Right? That's the problem. Because had Ben Affleck or Matt Damon come out and be like, yo, that's true, I really do think that would have made a difference. It's a shame. It's fucked up that would have made a difference. That shouldn't be the case, right? But it would have, right? And it's the process of, and you think about like the Combahee River Collective, right? And this idea that Black women are all we got. Like, Black women will always advocate for Black women. And Black women have always been like the most fervent activists in securing rights and protections for Black women. But that's all about a proximity to power. It goes back to this idea, like, Kimberly Crenshaw's original work about the distance that certain social groups have from positions of power. And when you think about like cis and trans Black women, very, very far from white heteropatriarchal norms of power, right? And so in a lot of respects, it makes sense that, white cis heterosexual wealthy men saying something about sexual assault, sexual abuse would actually make a really big difference in terms of helping to disrupt it, right? And I also think that that goes for, cis heterosexual Black men who are watching their friends catcall.
Yep.
Who are watching their friends and encouraging their friends to, shirk consent. I remember, in high school, in elementary, junior high school, guys, touching my body. That was one of the earliest ways I learned that. That's how that boy likes you, in air quotes. He just touched your breast. It's like, well, that's not cool. I don't want anyone touching my breast. Or he just touched your butt without your permission. Yay, he likes you. Congrats. And I'm like, no, first of all, fuck that. No, I don't like him, first of all. Second of all, I don't even know that I like boys. And third of all, whether you like me or I like you or not, don't fucking touch me, right? But this idea that you liking me is enough to give you permission and access to my body.
Right.
And I remember in high school, boys would have girls stand up in front of the room and they would rate our bodies. They would rate our butts. Oh, your butt's a 7. Your butt's a 10. Your butt's a 9. Your butt's a this. Oh, your breasts are a 6. Your breasts are this. And that was a pretty normal thing. That, I've seen that happen multiple times. We had things we had a list that would show up in our bathroom every few months. We had
the list too.
We had lists, and they would just show up in our bathrooms, just random. That boys would write lists about, who gave the best head, who was the best in bed, who was the prettiest, who they all wanted to fuck, and they would write these lists and just put them in the bathrooms. And they would be like, oh, did you see this new good head list? And I'm just like, what is going on? What is this? Right? And I remember in high school thinking, like you said, this is not right. This is not cool. But just imagine if one of the popular boys had been like, yo, stop this shit. It's just corny. It's just whack. Right? I feel like that's one of those things that we have to start talking about, the ways that we also buy into a lot of shit that harms us. Right? And it harms our loved ones. And that ends up working against us as a group. And that's what I'm most concerned about. I'm really concerned about the ways that we're conditioned in these environments. I was conditioned that was how dudes showed that they liked women. That's what I learned.
Yeah.
That's what I learned was the norm. Those were the cultural norms. Those were the logics and the norms and the practices that I learned growing up. And I wasn't really into cis heterosexual, Black dudes. That wasn't really my cup of tea, So for me, it was okay, I see y'all. Okay, I got it, But I think for a lot of cis heterosexual Black women, that shit's rough, right? Because imagine being socialized into a system that tells you that to be with this group of people who you're attracted to, you have to allow them access and exposure to your body in ways where you don't even get to really have, control over how that will be used. And, that's where I'm just what are we saying? What are we really saying? When we start buying into these cultures and these behaviors, what are we really saying? And do we really mean to be saying that, And
I think that's the challenge. If people would think critically about these things and say, is that really what I want to be saying? I think that's where the change comes.
Right.
But too often I think people are content in really not asking the question.
Right. Thank y'all for listening. Before you go, make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at @ThatBLKCouple, on Facebook at @ThatBlackCouple, and look us up on the internet at www.thatblackcouple.com. You can stream episodes on Google Play, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And you have to rate us high, because I'm a petty bitch, and I hate when I get low ratings. even though I don't have none yet. All right, love you. Bye.